To a different part of the United Kingdom. Tonight, we've come to Ringwood in Hampshire. On the western edge of the New Forest, there's been a weekly market here for 800 years, and that milestone is being celebrated in the town this summer. And Ringwood keeps another tradition alive, voting for Conservative MPs who've held this seat uninterrupted for 140 years. And as usual, our audience members arriving here this evening with their questions reflect the general political picture across the nation. And they want to ask, not surprisingly, about the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and what impact it will have on the royal family as a whole. And also, employment. Are we looking at a job crisis for young people? Welcome to Question Time from Ringwood. From the government, the Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander. She was previously Deputy Mayor of London under Sadiq Khan and has called Keir Starmer the right person for the job in difficult circumstances. Richard Holden is the Conservatives' shadow Transport Secretary. He has seen friends and colleagues defect to Reform UK in recent weeks, but has guaranteed he won't be following them out the door. Robert Jenrick is Reform's star signing. He's now the party's pick to be Chancellor if they win the next election. He joined the party last month, declaring the Conservatives weren't sorry and hadn't changed. And Jon Sopel is a journalist, author and co-host of the Newsagents podcast. He was the BBC's North America editor during Donald Trump's first term in office and wrote about the experience in his book A Year at the Circus. Good evening. Welcome to our panel. Welcome to our audience here in Ringwood. Very nice to see you. Thank you all for coming along. And, of course, welcome to you at home. Joining the conversation on social media is always pretty lively. Or just, that's an understatement, or just sit back and watch the programme. See how you feel. Let's get cracking with our first question. It's not going to come as a huge surprise. Josephine, off you go.
Can the royal family survive the arrest and potential trial of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor?
Lots of you have asked about this, so unless you've been, I don't know, asleep all day, you'll be across what has happened. But just let me remind everybody. So Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has been arrested by Thames Valley Police on suspicion of misconduct in public office, and it follows the release of documents from the Epstein files, which appear to show he shared reports from trade visits with Jeffrey Epstein. I have to say, of course, that Andrew has strenuously denied any wrongdoing, and he has been in police custody all day. John, can the royal family survive this?
Yes, probably, but I would have answered any question before that and said, of course they're going to survive. But I do think this represents, potentially, the most serious crisis for the royal family since the abdication of Edward VIII, and you're going back nearly 100 years then for something as serious as that. I was really struck by the statement from the King where it starts, "I have learned with the deepest concern the news about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and suspicion of misconduct in public office," as though Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is nothing to do with the royal family, is nothing to do with him. And of course, if this case comes to a trial, it will be Rex versus Mountbatten Windsor, big brother versus little brother. So we haven't been in this territory before. And the fact of the matter is that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has spent the day in a police cell, in an interview room, but he is still eighth in line to the throne. And so I think that does raise the question, has the royal family done enough? Yes, the King stripped him of his titles, but there have been so many allegations that are so serious that should more distance have been put in place earlier.
And what distance could that be then? Do you mean taking him out of the line of succession?
Yes, and I think that when journalists have made inquiries to the palace, to government departments as well, about things that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor did as a trade envoy, no one's wanted to answer. They've shut down the freedom of information requests. They've said that they're not going to go there. And so you think, well, OK, they're not supporting him, but are they kind of implicitly covering up for what he's done. And you go back to that quote from the 19th century constitutional historian Walter Badger. He said, "We must not let daylight in upon the magic of the royal family." Well, daylight has come in, and it doesn't look very magical right now.
Heidi?
So I think daylight is a good thing, and you ask the direct question whether the royal family can survive this. I think that they will. I think if you think about the life of service, really, of His Majesty the King and the former Queen, I think this country needs people that are willing to commit to public service, and I think that is true of those two individuals. And I look at the charity work of the Prince and Princess of Wales, supporting charities that do really important work on mental health, early childhood, and I think most people in the country appreciate that work. Now, clearly, Andrew has brought the royal family into disrepute. And I've seen the King's statement where he is very clear that the law now needs to run its course. And I think he was completely right to say that. The police obviously have the support of the government to conduct their investigations independently, and to make sure that they get to the bottom of this and follow wherever the evidence leads. And I think it's a very proud tradition of this country that policing happens without fear or favour. And, you know, I think that is what needs to happen now.
Man here in the glasses.
I think the short answer to that question is yes, the royal family will survive, and they'll come through it and everyone will love them in the future. Time will heal that wound. I think the bigger question around this subject is how do we deal with those that show any form of misconduct within public office? He's not the first, he won't be the last, whether it in government or other forms of public office. There's been plenty of people that have been accused as a result of these files or other things related to them. That's the bigger problem to me, is that there is a trend of people not behaving how we might expect them to do in positions of power or that we should be looking up to as a country.
OK. Richard?
I sort of make 2 points, really. And I think the first one is that the behaviour of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, whatever he is actually criminally convicted of or not.
And as I say, he has denied all wrongdoing.
But it's clear from what's already in the public domain that falls well below the standards expected of a member of the royal family, which is why the King has already acted in removing him from those roles. Now, questions around line of succession, things can be dealt with down the line. But I think it stands, the way he's behaved stands in such stark contrast to the way, as Heidi said, the late Queen behaved, or the way the King behaves, or the way that Princess Anne behaves, or the way that Prince William and the Duchess of Cambridge behave. You know, they've got a real sense of duty to this country and to stand up for us and represent us on the world stage. And to see the way that he has besmirched them, it must be deeply personally hurtful to them to see the way he's behaved throughout all of this. And
do you think, I mean, at the heart of the question is, you know, can the royal family survive? I mean, or will they be tainted by this?
Well, I think they can survive. I think the King's, you know, in removing all associations with him as far as possible. That statement today, I thought, was quite damning, you know, from the King. And I thought the gentleman's point, actually, in the audience was also an important one, because it's all about, it came down to the King's judgments. The King removed his titles, removed that support for him as quickly as he could. That's not been the case in other appointments recently, including in our ambassador to the United States, when things were known at the time of his appointment, and actually the decisions were made to press ahead with that appointment anyway. So I think there are bigger questions for the country and the government around the appointment of certain people. But I think the royal family itself will survive and will come through this, mainly because of the duty shown by the other senior members of the royal family, who genuinely, you can see the way they act, they can see the way this has impacted them and the family. And I think it's a really important thing that when there is misbehaviour, people are treated without fear and favour, as sadly was not the case in other appointments which have been made recently.
All right, a few hands up. Let's hear from you. It's the woman there in the glasses.
Yeah, I think that previous to today, I've been saddened and angered that in all of this, for however many years it's been going on, that the only two people, one of who's no longer here, has been a woman. And actually, for the first time, a man, other than Epstein himself, is being held accountable and all started to be held responsible for the actions taken in all of these files. And I hope that the US falls quickly into the same motion to follow in the footsteps of the police here.
Okay. Yeah. There's someone about... Oh, all I can see was your hand. Yes, a woman there.
I actually disagree that they've responded quickly. I think as a country, we saw it yonks ago, seeing it. We watched the Queen, bless her, we did adore her, but she tried to bail Andrew out, and pay off the victim, Geoffrey. I know that's sort of different to today's discussion with him being in police, but I think it's all been way too slow. They've tried to do the minimum, and just put plasters over it. And it's all been too late. We saw it yonks ago.
I mean, we don't know for sure who paid, where the money came from, actually, for the payoff. We don't know the facts about that, but I hear what you said. Yes, the man here in the front.
So I think the royal family will survive. However, I think this is perhaps an opportune time to think, do we actually need so many royals who are working on official business? Because then you have to have those checks for all of those royals. And actually, you've got the core royals, the King, Kate and William. And I think, actually, if we look back in history, perhaps we didn't have such a large amount of people who are actually working for the, as royals on official business.
Right. Okay. I mean, I think about Queen Victoria's time. She had, 13 children or something? She's married them all off around Europe and sort of did it that way. Yes, a woman at the back in the white sweater.
Andrew was followed around by protection officers at all times, so it makes me wonder, the officers who followed around must have known some information, that they would have handed that information over to their whoever is in charge of them. Therefore, the royal family would have had some whisperings many, many years ago about what he was up to. So the royal family aren't blameless in what Andrew has been doing. They will have been aware. So they have a lot more to answer to than just a statement that they have released.
Well, they're not here to answer for themselves. I can't imagine they're ever going to come on Question Time. But they're not here to say that they did or they didn't know. They certainly haven't said that they did know. Not at all. Robert?
Well, I just feel very sad, actually. Firstly, for the King and the royal family. It's a blessing, really, that the late Queen isn't alive to see this, because she lived such a blemishless life, really, of public service, as has already been said. And it would have been very tragic for her to see where this has gone. These are very, very serious allegations, both the crime that is alleged to have taken place in terms of giving away confidential state secrets, information to a man who, let's be honest, was at the time a convicted paedophile in jail for prostitution on a 14-year-old child. And I think we have to think about the victims, who don't seem to appear very much in our debate right now. There are so many women who were abused by Jeffrey Epstein and those around him, who are almost being forgotten in the debate that's happening at the moment. I said a while ago, and it's true today, whether Andrew ends up being prosecuted for these offences or others, he's disgraced himself, he's disgraced the royal family, and he's disgraced our country. And whatever his future may be, he should now go and lead a quiet life away from the public eye and allow the royal family to get on with the job that it does, generally speaking, in a superb way, which is uniting our country, representing us on the global stage, and allow the King to continue to do what he does as our head of state.
OK. All right. I'm going to move on, because we've got lots of questions to get to. Obviously, this has been a massive story today, and lots of you wanted to talk about it. Before I do, I'll tell you where we are next week, which is Birmingham. And the week after that, we're off to Kettering. So if you live in or close to Birmingham or Kettering, and you'd like to come and sit in the audience and put your questions to our panel, go to the Question Time website, follow the instructions there, and hopefully we shall see you on the night. OK, Paul Haynes, where are you sitting?
Hello.
There you go.
Oh, yeah. Is a U-turn or a change of political party a weakness or a sign of good leadership and a sense of direction?
What do you think?
Weakness. I think if you make a stand-up policy, you stick by it and take the consequences.
Are you thinking of any party in particular?
Sadly, Labour Party for U-turns, but with a change of party, obviously, now the Reform Party is becoming the old care home of Tories.
Right.
So, I mean, where do you go?
Rob, I'll let you answer that in a minute. You can get your Zimmer frame man. We'll see how you get on.
44, you're writing me off already. Blimey.
Heidi.
Tough round here.
OK, so Paul's asked a question. He's pointed the finger at you. I mean, I have lost count of the number of U-turns by Labour. Benefit cuts, winter fuel payment changes, two-child benefit cap, farm inheritance tax. I mean, are you proud of that?
So I think a responsible government actually listens to advice that it's given. If circumstances change and more information becomes available, I think the right thing to do some of the time is to have a bit of a course correction. And, you know, I do take issue with what you said, Fiona, there about some of the examples you gave.
Do you?
I do.
Why?
For example, you said we have changed our policy on removing the two-child cap in universal credit. We set up a commission to look at child poverty, to look at what we could best do to lift children out of poverty in this country. And at the conclusion of that, we decided that the single most important thing you could do was to adjust the benefit system and lift nearly 500,000 children out of poverty in this country. So, no, it wasn't a
Hang on, Heidi, just a minute.
It was morally the right thing to do.
It was defended by Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer as the right thing to do and the thing that the country could afford. A year later, hey presto, the country can suddenly afford it. How is that not a U-turn?
No, that's not a U-turn. We always said that we would look at how we could address child poverty.
Heidi? Why do you think people are laughing at that?
Well, perhaps it's my inability to express the government's policy as succinctly as I might otherwise. But look, the point here is that when I was knocking on doors during the general election, I saw toddlers wrapped up in a hat and a bobble scarf, and a scarf and a bobble hat because their parents couldn't afford to put the heating on in quite a wealthy area, actually, in Swindon. And I was gobsmacked to see that in 2024, just before the general election. And so, actually, I want children not to be growing up in families where mum and dad are thinking about whether they can actually afford to put food on the table. I want children to be growing up being able to do well at school and being able to be successful in the future. Now, I recognise that I've actually moved away slightly from the question that this gentleman asked.
Well, I think John's desperate to jump in for a minute.
It just seems to me that, look, you've got a massive majority, and yet, you know, when it was personal independence payments, it was political ineptitude that you just could not get that through the House of Commons, and you had to back down on it. When you've got a majority that most other governments in history would have dreamt of having, and yet you had to climb down again and again this week over the elections when you kind of got legal advice that was suddenly bad for you. Well, why didn't you take the legal advice in the first place, and then you wouldn't have had the embarrassment of having to do that and then back down on it?
So when it comes to the decision on local elections, we did get updated legal advice. And if it was a choice between a messy, expensive process through the courts or taking the decision now to give clarity to those 30 or so councils who had come to us because they're going through local government reorganisation and who said, look, there's a lot of time and expense of organising elections this year to only be having elections
question about why you didn't get that legal
year.
Advice in the first place?
So look,
I mean, the situation hadn't changed.
As a government minister, some of the time advice is updated, and you can either choose to ignore it or you can choose to act on it. Now, I think a responsible government chooses to act on it. I think it was a reasonable thing to do in the first place, when councils said, well, hang on a minute, we've got a lot on our plate at the moment with reorganising the local government boundaries, to say, could we postpone them for a year? But when the facts change, I think it was right to give certainty to those local authorities so they could get on and run the elections. And I would say
what facts had changed, just out of interest?
So I haven't been privy to the legal advice. I'm the Transport Secretary, not the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government. But Steve Reid is a good colleague of mine. I trust him. If he's looked at it, then I think that was the right thing to do in those circumstances. But where we have changed our policy policy slightly. If you look at, for example, means testing of winter fuel allowance, we did make a mistake there. We set the threshold too low. And so that is why we have changed course, and we've said that households who are pensioners who have an income of below £35,000 will now all get the winter fuel allowance. We could have buried our head in the sand and not changed course on that, but I think we did the right thing for the British people in that decision.
All right. So, listen, there is not a party that's not had U-turns. Reform UK is a very young party. You had a few of your own. So let's talk about two-child benefit cap. Nigel Farage pledged to scrap it only, 9 months ago or so. Then tweaked it a bit, and hey presto, you come along and say, actually, we're not going to scrap it at all. So that looks like a 180.
Well, look, I do think there are occasions where it's actually good leadership to listen and to change course. If you do it over and over again, it becomes a pattern of behaviour, and the government becomes chaotic and weak, and you question whether that leader or Prime Minister is really in control of their government. With what happened with reform, Nigel and I did discuss it, and we concluded together that although it was certainly well-intentioned, because we all want to help children out of poverty, of course we do. We all want to help Brits to be able to have families, to look after those children properly. And as Heidi said, there are plenty of families in our country who are finding things very, very tough at the moment with the cost of living. But the fairest way to do that is not through yet more welfare. We want to help those families by getting them good jobs, by keeping their bills down, particularly energy bills, and getting inflation down for all the cost of food that we see in the supermarkets, by getting more homes built so we can cut the cost of housing, that it's those sorts of things rather than just ever more welfare and benefits that is the way to actually resolve that. And if I may just take a bit of issue with what Heidi said in describing the chain of events, a little over a year ago, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, felt so strongly about this issue that the two-child benefit cap should not be lifted, that he actually expelled 7 Labour members of Parliament from the Labour Parliamentary Party, including some of Heidi's most long-serving colleagues, and yet he suddenly changed his tune on this.
Speech, Robert.
Well,
you know that is entirely different.
I don't think it is. It tells you something about how strongly the Prime Minister felt about this, that he was willing to actually throw out his colleagues from the Parliamentary Party. And so, you know, it's not really fair to say that he just changed his mind because the facts changed. He changed his mind because he'd lost control of the Parliamentary Labour Party. And you've seen the same on benefits, on winter fuel, on inheritance tax for businesses, business rates for pubs, time and again.
But there are other things changed with Reform UK as well. So Nigel Farage, for example... Well, just hang on a second. Nigel Farage made great play in the run-up to the last election about raising the personal tax allowance to £20,000. That's now gone out of the window. So how can people know what you stand for?
It hasn't actually gone out the window. We've said that we would like to do it.
Yeah, but you're not going to do it.
But we're not going to... Well, firstly, a general election may not be for 3 years. We don't know what the fiscal position is going to be.
Of what
and we said we're
Mr
not
Farage was promising.
We're going to be careful with people's money. So we're not going to go and make tax and spend commitments.
But you were promising it, and now you're not promising it.
We're saying that we're going to come to that in the next generation if we can afford it. And I make a virtue of that because you want stability in the economy. You don't want a government that just goes and makes tax and spend commitments like Rachel Reeves did before the last general election. She said no tax rises, £60 billion of tax rises. So if in reform we can ensure that the promises we make before the next general election are ones you can truly believe in, then I think that's a good thing.
Do you mean unlike the last ones? Is that the comparison you're making?
Well,
for example,
I think
£20,000
the lesson of the last few years of all political parties is that the public are sick of politicians making promises that they can't keep. We've seen that with the Conservatives. We've certainly seen it with Labour. And if Reform have made manifesto commitments in the past which hadn't been properly thought through, we must make sure it never happens again. And that's exactly the role that I want to fulfil within Reform.
All right, lots of hands up. Let's come to some of you. A man here in the check shirt in the front.
You mentioned that it's not nice to see kids not dressed properly for the weather, and you gave a reason that parents may not be able to put the heating on or afford to. But does this government not tax energy companies at 75% on what comes in? And, I mean, Ed Miliband seems to think that that's not going to directly affect consumer prices. And one more point, if I may. You mentioned it's good to listen to the public, and a government that does listen to the public is a good government. But 3 million people signed a petition to say that they wanted to call an early general election. Yes, it was debated, but it seemed that debate seemed to fall on deaf ears.
All right, Heidi, I'll come back to you. I expect there'll be a number of points. Yes, the woman in the yellow top there.
You talk about having trust, Mr. Jenrick. However, there have been a recent, obviously, spate of defections to reform from the Conservatives. I just wonder how we can have any faith in politicians who've displayed such naked opportunism.
Good answer to that, Robert, before we move on.
I see it very differently to that, as you might expect. I think if you... why are you in politics? Are you in politics just to stick with a political party, even if you have concluded that that party is heading in the wrong direction, that it doesn't serve the national interest? Or are you willing sometimes to do something that's actually very difficult to do, and very few people have done it, which is to put party loyalty to one side, even loyalty to a party you've been a part of for decades since you're a teenager, and do what you think is in the national interest? And I concluded, and it was a very difficult and personal decision to me, you know, I'd stood for leadership of the Conservative Party, but I concluded that the Conservative Party had not learnt its lessons from the mistakes it made when it was in office, that if it was ever in government again, it would make exactly the same mistakes all over again, and that it couldn't be trusted. And that if, like me, and I think millions of people across the country, you want to get rid of the present government and have a better government that's actually going to bring about real change in the country, then you had to rally behind Nigel Farage and reform. And that's what I've chosen to do. That wasn't easy. It wasn't about personal ambition, although I am ambitious, and I'm ambitious for the country, frankly. I want to get this country back on a better track, and I want to have a good government running it for once, which we haven't had for a long time.
Obviously, that is the government you were a part of.
Yeah, and I resigned from that government, Fiona. I resigned. In the last Parliament, I was the only person to resign on a matter of principle. I then went onto the backbenches, and I campaigned and voted against that government because I knew it was failing on immigration. It was making promises and consistently breaking them.
All right, well, shall we bring in your
politician who didn't.
Conservative colleague? There's a lot of heavy sighing going on from you, Richard. Would you like to come in at this point?
Look, I mean, Robert says it was a principled decision. I mean, Robert got kicked out of the Conservative Party. That's what actually happened, if people remember what happened when Kemi got rid of him. Look, I think it's pretty... I supported Robert in the leadership election, so to see him go was a really tough thing for me. Robert and I have known each other for a very long period of time, and I'd like to think that there was some friendship there as well. I think that this had a lot. Those decisions, Robert paints it as about the good of the country and things like that. I'm not convinced of that. I think, he got kicked out and then he jumped into bed with the first people who would have him, i.e. Nigel Farage and co. And it worries me.
I mean, he got kicked out because he was about to jump into bed.
Well, Nigel Farage didn't seem to think that on the day, right?
Yes, but Kemi Badenoch said, I had to...
Well,
you can speak for yourself, Robert Jenrick.
Yeah,
but I mean...
look, I was obviously about to do this, and I'd made my decision, and I'm convinced it was the right one. And Richard, for the sake of this programme, I know you have to, you can pretend that you think everything is sweetness and light in the Conservative Party, but you and I have had many, many conversations in which you have shared my concerns that the party made massive mistakes, that unfortunately it's not a national party anymore, that it's very unlikely to win more than a handful of seats at the next election, and that if you want to get rid of Labour and this failing government, you've got to back reform.
No, but
know that.
So it was
I know
about
that.
personal ambition.
No.
You had a middle-ranking shadow cabinet job under Kemi Badenoch, and you've gone for being shadow chancellor under the party.
Not officially shadow chancellor.
Well, not officially.
John.
Shadow
Treasury spokesperson is actually the job.
John, if you think it's easy to do what I've done, then
You're kicked out, Robert.
You walk away from friends.
Robert, you've made that point. Let's hear what John's got to say.
But John,
you've made that point. Robert. Let's hear what John's got to say.
I am ambitious for the country. I don't want to see the country going down the path it's going at the moment.
You've made that point.
And the only way to do that is to have a change of course.
But look, you were a Remainer when David Cameron was the Prime Minister. You were a Brexiteer when Boris... You said it's a shameful that Liz Truss is still in the Conservative Party, but you voted for her budget. And now, when the Tories are languishing in the polls, which they most certainly are, you've gone to the party that is leading in the polls, and you've got, not shadow, Treasury spokesperson, Jon.
Jon.
I'm going to let the audience in as well, very briefly, because I must let the audience in.
I'm not going to take any lessons from the man who said that Peter Mandelson was a class act when he was appointed as our ambassador to Washington.
Nigel Farage said much the same.
I don't think that you're a very good judge.
Nigel Farage said much the same.
Didn't you also go on telly and say that Hugh Edwards, after he'd committed the most appalling crime...
You're deflecting.
Was a great man and a close friend of yours,
I think everyone can see that you're deflecting, because I'm not seeking elected office.
You're not answering the questions that I'm posing to you.
In fairness, John's not asking anyone to vote for him.
Do you think that Peter Mandelson is a class act, Jon?
OK.
The gentleman's question.
Very briefly...
Distance yourself from Peter Mandelson, Jon.
In fairness, Nigel Farage says...
I've said on the podcast repeatedly that we've learnt about Peter Mandelson has absolutely, completely changed.
But you knew when you said he was a class act...
OK, goodness me, stop, the pair of you. Robert, I might remind you that your current leader, Nigel Farage, also said some very complimentary things about Peter Mandelson when he was appointed. But anyway, let's park that for a minute. I know you want to come back in, but my goodness, the audience is sitting here, not getting a word in edgeways. Right, man here in the front.
Perfect. So, with the level of defectors, should there not be enforced by-elections because they were...
About that. I'm going to go around a few more and then we'll get an answer to that, or I certainly hope so. Yes, woman here in the front, you've been very patient with your hand up for ages.
No, from Heidi. I think the Labour Party have had 15 U-turns, and you said that you respond to the public appeal and to democracy, but you had 14 years as a shadow government. Did you not have time to formulate a plan? It just seems like it's snakes and ladders.
OK. Let's hear some more points. Where have we got? Yes, there's a woman over there in glasses with a black top. Yeah.
Hi. So I'm an ex-teacher, and I've actually seen the poverty that Heidi was talking about in what would be deemed a well-incomed area where children are coming into school hungry. They haven't had breakfast. They don't have coats on. You know, and as teachers, we're providing that ourselves. They're unable to buy books, etc. So I find it really shocking that we're hearing the Reform Party say that they think it is a good idea to keep the child benefit cap to 2 children and also reduce the disability payment. So we're actually taking away from the most vulnerable in our society.
We haven't said
OK. All right. Woman in the pink top.
Thank you. I'd actually like people to stop bickering, because there just seems to be, we're always arguing between each parties, and actually I'd like the parties to actually work for me.
OK. Well, let's go a little bit further back with a black top on, yeah.
So when parties are coming up with their promises, and then you say we get additional information which causes us to, you know, not U-turn, because you wouldn't use that expression, but wouldn't it be better to get as much information as possible before you make a promise?
Yeah. Right. Let me hear one more thing, and then I can, because I know you want to come back in. Yes, the man, you've got sort of colourful top on a white T-shirt. Yes.
Robert, you said about how you didn't win the leader election and then you got removed from the party. Is that not just a case of you throwing your toys out the pram because you're not in charge? And so you're going to go to a party that's not got many MPs, so you've got a bit more of a megaphone and still talk the rubbish that you do?
Right, OK, right. You want to come back in and you've got to be brief, because otherwise we won't get around the questions. Robert.
Well, I'd just like to answer the important question from the lady over there. Look, we want to protect the most vulnerable in society. I think we all want a safety net for people who are decent, hard-working people, but who fall on hard times. What we can't have as a country is a benefits bill that just keeps rising more and more and more, because firstly, it will bankrupt the country, and secondly, it's unfair to all those people who are making tough choices in their own lives. And so we've got to take a stand. We've got to find ways of bringing that down. We're not going to take away payments from those people who are disabled. What we've talked about are, for example, people with very mild anxiety or depression getting access to the benefit system. And I don't think that most people in the country think that that is right at the moment.
OK, well, we look forward to the details of what that policy will be.
And instill fairness back into the welfare system.
Richard,
I just want to come back to the gentleman's question slightly earlier, which is about U-turns. And it's, for me, and that sort of actually permeates into
I've got a little list here of Conservative U-turns.
No. I'm happy to accept that, obviously, the last government made mistakes, otherwise we wouldn't have lost the election. And the British public are never wrong. But the crucial thing is you've got to learn from those mistakes. And I think that's exactly the point which the gentleman and the lady with him next to him were alluding to. I think Kemi's been incredibly clear, right? When it came to the grooming gangs issue, she led the charge on that, and the government managed to get the government to do a U-turn. When it came to Lord Mandelson's appointment, actually the information was known in advance, but Kemi took the fight to the government and delivered that U-turn. When it came to taxes on family farms, it was the Conservatives who led the battle to deliver those U-turns. Actually, a lot of the information on this, people knew in advance. The pubs have been screaming at the
let's come back to Heidi. She can answer some of
the high street's been screaming out, and yet they pressed ahead with business rate changes, which are costing jobs on the high street. We're seeing youth unemployment now at higher levels.
OK, we may come to that in a minute,
really
so hold your fire on that. Heidi, what about the point, which is what Robert is saying, but also you've heard from the audience, is it's all very well saying we listen, and if people want us to change our minds, we're listening to the electorate and we're going to do that. What about the woman who said, I can't remember where you're sitting now, but snakes and ladders, why don't you work out the facts in the first place and then make your plan, rather than do it, hear loads of people objecting, think, oh, maybe we better change our minds then?
Look, there's a choice between having to suffer a bad headline for a day and ultimately doing the right thing for the country. And we saw what happened.
But what they're saying is, why don't you get it right in the first place?
But we saw what happened under the Conservative Party when they pursued their Rwanda scheme at all cost. We paid £700 million as a country to send 4 volunteers to Rwanda. So I think it's better, if new facts emerge, if things aren't working, if you get new advice, to do what is right for the hard-working people of our country. I'd like to come back to that gentleman that asked a question about wouldn't it have been better if Robert had caused a by-election, given that he got elected to represent the Conservative Party and is now playing with the cranks and the conspiracists in the Reform Party. I took a different approach back in 2018 when I was a Member of Parliament and I had a fundamental disagreement with the then leader of my party, Jeremy Corbyn, who I didn't think was fit to be Prime Minister. And I could not have, hand on heart, knocked on a door in another general election and aided and abetted Jeremy becoming Prime Minister. And so I stepped down from Parliament so I could continue to look myself in the mirror. And actually, I think it's pretty shameful what you've done, Robert, which is to jump ship to reform, to continue to be able to draw your parliamentary salary. You profess it's about ambition for the country, but I think, let's all be honest, it's about your own personal ambitions.
Listen, you've answered that point. You've answered that point.
If I may just say, Heidi, you actually left because you were given a very well-paid job by Sadiq Khan as one of his deputy mayors, didn't you, in London?
No.
That's what I
think this might come under... Who was talking about bickering?
About Jeremy Corbyn.
Someone's talking about bickering. We might be descending into that. Heaven forfend. Right, let's take another question. And this is something, actually, Richard, that you have just mentioned. So let's hear from... is it Nicola Farmer now, or is it Nicole? I can't... Nicole Farmer now.
With new figures showing unemployment rising, what can be done to improve young people's access to stable jobs?
So the latest unemployment rate for 16 to 24-year-olds is 16.1%. That's the highest level in more than 10 years. And for some months now, it's been higher than the EU. And you've got companies like a recruitment agency, Reed, reporting job advertised roles down by 70% compared to 2023. How old are you, Nicole, if you don't mind me asking? So you're 16, and is this something you're worried about?
Yeah, I think a lot of people my age and around my age struggle with finding employment now and also thinking about later in life finding employment.
Right, OK. Gosh, I mean, at 16 you should be living life and loving it, but this is something you're worried about already. Richard?
Look, I mean, Nicole, I had my first job waiting tables as a sort of 16, 17-year-old. I was so shy at that point. My first girlfriend had to go and get the application form for me. But it really transformed...
How things have changed, Richard.
How things have changed. But it transformed my ability to speak to people, to actually go out there and interact with people of different generations. And I think it really provides a sense of work ethic to people and really gets you, to have your own money, to be able to spend your own money. I think it's such an important thing. Like, I was speaking to a little cafe owner in Billericay just last week at Cloud9. They're really being squeezed by the combination of business rates going up on one side, and on the other side, the national insurance rises as well, the national insurance tax, which employers have to pay. And the real impact on that has been on part-time and in younger staff, where you didn't have to pay it until you hit quite a high threshold before. Now you're basically going to pay on anybody who's got a part-time job. And it just means that those starter jobs are just totally out of reach for employers now. They're having to either cut back, raise prices. It's one of the reasons inflation stayed higher for longer. But the fact that we've now got higher youth unemployment than most of Europe, it is, we used to look at places like Spain and Italy and Greece and think, gosh, we'll never be like them because we've always had that flexible labour market. We're not overtaxing business for employing young people. And the real worry for me is that the knock-on long-term consequences for people like yourself. Because I had that job opportunity and it led me to all sorts of different things when I was a teenager, enabled me to, go and take my first girlfriend on dates and all sorts of things, but also enabled me to, develop all of those soft skills which are so important for employment later in life. So I think the government should really look again at those business rates, particularly hitting the high street firms and those hospitality businesses and those retail firms. Conservatives have said we will have no business rates for any leisure, hospitality or retail firm on under 110,000 a year. That would be a huge tax cut for a lot of small high street businesses, and I think it's exactly where the country needs to go. We've got to take taxes off business to enable young people to get jobs.
John?
I think it's bleak in the extreme, and I kind of don't want to be the doom-monger here, but you look at AI and what that's going to be doing for graduate entry jobs. And, as Richard said, it's a very difficult climate to be employing young people, and I'll be very interested to see what happens about the kind of minimum wage provision for people that are going straight into jobs as well. I think it's incredibly tough, and I think that, graduate tax as well, with some people paying an extra 9% in effect on their taxes, so that someone who hasn't gone to university is actually much better off than someone who's got a student loan to pay off. I'd love to think that there was this kind of magic thing that you could just do, but I kind of look back at when I was 22 and starting at the radio station in Southampton, Radio Solent, and I was earning £8,000 a year, and a house was 30,000, and you could afford to buy. And I think this problem of affordability for young people now is terribly difficult. And I think the scales in our system, our fiscal system, have way too much balanced, can I say, old farts like me, where the boomer generation have got the triple lock and they've got free prescriptions and they've got... I don't think the social policy is geared enough towards helping young people.
Okay. Man in the white T-shirt, yeah.
Understanding as well about how minimum wage, although it is trying to be rise to the same age as people, companies won't hire people my age due to the fact that they're not experienced. They will go for older people.
How old are you?
I'm 19.
Right.
So there's businesses would not choose to hire people my age. They choose more experienced, which will then make us and unemployment go up as it is seen.
Okay, and there's a woman in a black top over there.
We've spoken quite a lot about different demographics, but one demographic I don't think we've covered is the general working population with sort of your average jobs and average salaries. We've got mortgage rates that are going up this year because of the interest rates. The lifting of the two-child benefit cap, personally for me, is something that I didn't want to see. I work hard, my husband works hard. We have one child. Would we have liked more? Yes, but we made a decision not to because financially we couldn't afford it. And yet to see workers then have the high rate tax fixed as well, it just seems that at the moment the workers are getting squashed and squashed and squashed when we're trying to do the right thing, and it's just not working for us.
Okay, yes. And the woman in the green sleeveless top there. Yeah.
Given the number of graduates that are unemployed, would it not be better, rather than encourage them to take out huge student loans that never get repaid, to put incentives into employees to bring back the old-fashioned apprenticeship system?
Okay, and I'll just quickly hear from the woman next to you.
I just feel like we've sat and watched policies over sort of 20-odd years, really, where we've reduced support for sort of health visitors, for children's centres. We've now seen more and more children and young people with mental health issues. There's no youth clubs. And it feels like we've just done a sort of a whole blanket policies of trying to do the worst we can for our children and young people. And I just can't understand where we've got to.
So, Heidi, Nicole, at the grand old age of 16, is worrying about how she's going to find a stable job in the future. And what you're looking at is the graduate sort of jobs crisis. Some of them are describing it as. What can be done to improve the situation?
So I totally understand where you're coming from. And I was thinking back to my first job, actually, when I left university, and I did for a temporary period of time. I worked in a call centre, and of course, some of those jobs where people are phoning up businesses now aren't actually getting to speak to a human being. You find a chatbot, it drives some people absolutely mad, doesn't it, that experience? And so the world of work is definitely changing, and I understand why it's so important that the government commits to giving decent employment opportunities to young people. We are rolling out something called our Youth Guarantee, which will mean that for every young person aged between 18 and 21 who is in receipt of universal credit for 18 months or more, they will get a guaranteed 6-month job placement. We're investing hugely, over £1 billion in apprenticeships as well. I was with a whole group of apprenticeships at Transport for Wales yesterday who are not only getting the benefit of learning on the job but are also studying, and so getting more high quality apprenticeships is something that this Labour government is absolutely committed to. But the most important thing that we can do for you, Nicole, is to get the economy firing on all cylinders. We have secured over £340 billion of private investment since we came into government. That means businesses, more businesses locating here, businesses growing. We saw inflation come down this week, which is good news for businesses. If interest rates come down again, we've had 6 interest rates cuts. That means it's cheaper for businesses to borrow and to expand. And so, look, that's why it's so critical that we do have stability in the government. We have had to take some difficult decisions as a government, but they've been the necessary decisions to create those conditions for economic growth. Because if we get those new high-quality jobs, that's the way in which people like you can look forward to the future with confidence and know that when you're 18, when you're 21, there's going to be good quality jobs there for you.
What about the point made by the man in the back in the white T-shirt? I think what you were referring to when you're saying why should people employ people like me, you're 19, is the idea, and this is something that Labour has committed to, of raising the minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds to the same as those above that age. It looks like the government's thinking, well, I don't want to mention the U-turn word again, but it's looking like that might be dropped. Is that the case?
So the minimum wage for young people will go up to £10.85 an hour in April of this year.
So asking about 18 to 20-year-olds specifically.
Yeah, so that is for those people.
So
it will go up. It will go up in April by 85p to £10.85. That is still less than what the national minimum wage is. Since we came into government, we did promise to significantly increase the national minimum wage because we know that the cost of living pressures that people are experiencing are real at the moment. It's causing real pressure on household budgets. And so we think it was the right thing to do to give an income boost to the lowest paid in our country, given those cost of living pressures. And it's why the minimum wage for young people will go up to £10.85 in April.
Robert?
Well, it's a mess at the moment, isn't it? The economy is in a very bad place, and absolutely everyone you speak to is feeling hard up right now. All the bills are going up, wages are stagnating, companies are laying people off. Every business I visit across the country is putting off investment or parting company with staff. Factories are closing, energy bills are going up because of the ridiculous energy policy being pursued by Ed Miliband. And it's young people of all who are suffering the most. And I feel very sad when I meet people like you, Nicole, because you should be thinking that this country has buzz and excitement about it. You should be looking forward to your future instead of feeling as worried and concerned as you do right now. I feel like the social contract for young people has been shredded, not just in the last 2 years, but frankly over the last 10 or 20 years, because young people are going to struggle to get on the housing ladder because successive governments haven't built enough homes. You're going to get taxed to the hilt. Childcare is incredibly expensive. If you're a little bit older, the best days of your life at university might have got ruined by overbearing COVID regulations. Life is tough, and government is going to have to step in and fix this. The answer is, as Heidi said, to get the economy going again. But everything that Rachel Reeves is doing is moving things in the opposite direction. If you cared about stability, you wouldn't have had 10 or 20 different U-turns. If you care about employment, stop hiking taxes on jobs. It's not that difficult. Don't increase national insurance, a tax on jobs, just at a time when the economy is in a difficult spot. And just at the time, as Jon said, AI is transforming the jobs market altogether. So it means that you're in this terrible situation where jobs in, say, the hospitality industry, you're being priced out because the pubs and the cafes and restaurants are closing or just can't afford to take people on. And then graduate-level jobs are being decimated by AI. The number of entry-level jobs at graduate level has fallen by almost 40% in a year. So you couldn't think of a worse time in our recent economic history to do what Rachel Reeves has done, which is to hike taxes on jobs. And you, I'm afraid, are bearing the brunt of it.
OK, I'm going to take one more question. We've got about 8 minutes or so, I think. From Abe Jane. Where are you sitting? Off you go.
With rising unemployment and cost of living, should we pause net immigration as we have no jobs or affordable housing to accommodate people?
So I'm assuming you think it should be paused?
Unfortunately, yes. Almost to the point of we can't even get young people jobs. Young people can't even afford houses.
OK. Richard, should we pause net immigration?
I think the issue around immigration overall is that there are people coming and going all the time. So there's students coming in and they count towards the immigration numbers. My brother got married to an Italian girl. She counts towards immigration numbers. You're going to say that, you know, they can't be married and live in the UK. So I think the crucial thing is we need to control immigration and get the numbers really down, and we decide who comes and when. And I think on the other side, we've also got to get a real grip. And the truth is, the last Conservative government, of which Robert and I were both members, did not get a grip on the ECHR and some of the rules which allowed people to come here illegally and stay illegally and then use our benefits and welfare system illegally, costing all of you money. My party has done a huge amount of work now with review after review on ensuring we're in exactly the right place for the future, where we can get out of the ECHR, maintain the rights that everybody wants, but not just be a soft touch to people who want to come here illegally and leech off our benefit system. That's what we need to do, ensure that we can control who comes here, and if people come here illegally, they're not allowed to stay, and they go back to where they came from. Earlier on, Heidi made a point about the Rwanda scheme. The truth is we have to have a deterrent. That's why the small boat crossings have gone up under the Labour government, which is wrong. And we've got to have a proper returns agreement, and we've got to have a proper deterrent. The reason they cancelled it is because they don't care about tackling illegal migration. That's why it's gone up. We need to see it controlled.
It didn't work, Richard.
And
you know it didn't.
The reason it didn't work is because it wasn't allowed to take place.
OK, let me bring other people in, because we haven't...
In fairness to Heidi, the day that Yvette Cooper walked into the Home Office, of the hundreds of people that have been rounded up to be sent to Rwanda, only 2 were still in custody because the courts had let them all out. Everyone knew that. That's why I resigned from the government. Everyone else who sat around the cabinet table were happy to spin a yarn to the British public because they thought, well, let's eke out the last few months before a general election. Let's not be honest with the public. And that's one of the reasons why people have lost faith in the Tory party.
We both stood at the last general election, Robert, on the same manifesto.
No, not really. I put on my election.
No, literally,
I put on my election leaflets that we should leave the ECHR.
Which is exactly now our policy.
Oh, right.
Well, so, it is, Robert.
Well, I don't know what the Tory party's policy is, but
we all know that
I would be stunned if the Tory party ever left the ECHR.
We all know that you don't know what Reform's party policy is because you voted for welfare one day and then now you're fighting against it the next day.
OK.
No, I think that's
All
very
right.
clear now. Not...
All right. So, ECHR, European Convention on Human Rights. And I think, I'm just thinking about your question. I think what you mean is, should we reach net zero immigration now? I think that's what you're saying. I'm just rephrasing that slightly. Jon, I mean, there are surveys that show we're getting closer and closer to that.
I mean, if you look at the peak of net migration, it kind of nearly topped 1 million in 1 year in 23. It's now down to 200,000. And it's I'm sure Heidi will take the credit for that, but it's true that the last Conservative government, the measures that were put in place have contributed to that. And it's continuing to go down. And so you could have soon a potential net outflow of people from this country. And then you're left in the position where you think, well, have we got the staff that we need to run the care homes and the health service and pick the crops in the field? And so it's not something where you've got kind of complete control of the tiller. You can pull it in one direction and it suddenly starts to fall. And I bet you that continues to fall. And then you're left with a different position where you might have skill shortages. In America, where Donald Trump has been incredibly successful in closing the southern border and has had this big deportation of illegal immigrants, you've got all sorts of employers in America saying, whoa, this has got to stop because we haven't got the people now to pick the crops or to work in the restaurants or to clean the bedrooms in the hotels. And so you can end up in a situation where you stifle economic growth because you haven't got the people to do the jobs.
Heidi.
So,
Abby is calling for net zero immigration now.
Yeah, so overall net migration is currently at its lowest level in half a decade. And so that corroborates what Jon has just said. I do still think that we should want the brightest and best to come to this country to set up new businesses, employ people. I also think, if I'm totally honest, people meet people overseas, they fall in love, they start relationships, and if someone is earning a decent wage and they meet the income threshold, then actually saying no, somebody couldn't come and join someone, I don't think that's the right thing for our country. I think we need a firm but fair immigration system. That's why, since we've come into government, we've increased the number of deportations and removals that have been happening for people who are here illegally. If you don't have a right to be in this country, you should have enforcement action taken against you, and that is why nearly 60,000 people have been deported or removed, a 31% increase on the preceding 19 months under the last Conservative government. And, whilst I'm willing to make the case for immigration to this country, I also think it is totally unacceptable that we have people who are crossing the channel in boats in an uncontrolled way. And the government is serious about tackling this problem. We can't fix it overnight, but our work with the French has prevented 40,000 channel crossings this year. We've seized 905 boats. We've taken down 18,000 social media accounts used by these people smugglers that are essentially trafficking people into the country. We're increasing the raids that we're doing on rogue businesses that are employing illegal workers here. That means if you've got more raids, you've got more arrests, you've got more removals from the country. So we're doing the hard work of getting the immigration system back under control. But the truth of the matter is we inherited an absolute mess from the previous government. And it's these two over here. These lads can bicker all they like, but we're fixing the problems that they created, and now they pretend that they've got all the answers. Don't listen to them.
Right. So look, we didn't have much time for that question. I wanted to get it in, and now I haven't got time to come to any of you. I'm so sorry, because look, you've got your hands up. I know, sorry about that. I know, look at your face. You're really cross about that. Apologies, apologies. You're smiling back. Oh. Crikey, I'm exhausted. I don't know about you. Right, we're out of time. Let me tell you, just remind you that next week we're going to Birmingham, the week after that we're in Kettering. So if you'd like to come and put your 10 penneth to, or tuppence worth, whatever the expression is, to our panel, please apply to be in the Question Time audience. But otherwise, for now, thank you to our panel. Thank you so much to all of you. And I'm sorry I couldn't get more of you in, but I certainly tried. And thank you to you at home for watching. From Ringwood, bye-bye.